I used to think I was one of the most accountable people on my team. I showed up early, I hit my deadlines, I did exactly what was asked of me. And then one day my manager asked me a question I wasn't ready for. But did it actually work? I froze. Because I had never been asked that question before. I was a software developer at a large bank. I just pushed the feature. It ran perfectly on my machine, and I'd done my part, checked every box. But the project hadn't moved. The needle hadn't budged. And for the first time I realized I had been confusing effort with accountability, and that confusion was quietly capping my entire career. Here's what nobody tells you when we talk about accountability and leadership. Most leaders are working hard, genuinely hard, and still failing to be accountable because we've been measuring the wrong thing their entire career. By the end of this video, you're going to have an exact framework I've used with executives and founders to shift from effort-based accountability to outcome-based ownership. The kind that actually builds trust, drives results, and makes you leader people want to follow, not just the one who shows up. And this isn't a lecture about personal responsibility. It's about rewiring how you see your role entirely. Let's get started. Here's the belief most leaders carry into every meeting, every project, every performance review. I did my part. I am accountable. It sounds right. It feels right. It might even be your organization rewards for that. But there's a massive difference between I did my part and did it actually work. The first one is about clocking in the effort, and the second one is about owning the outcome. And the gap between those two questions, that's where most leadership careers stall. Because when you're effort focused, you stop at the edge of your job description. You finish the task, you send the email, you write the spec. But outcome-focused leaders ask a different question after every action. Did that move anything? That is what separates the leaders who flat out from the ones who keep getting trusted with more. Point number one, ownership does not stop at your job description. Here's what real accountability looks in practice. And it's wider than most leaders are comfortable with. When I was developer at the bank, I thought my accountability ended at my code, my task, my output, done. But what I didn't understand yet was that accountability isn't a boundary, it's a posture. Real ownership means that if something is in your world, formally assigned or not, it is yours to address. The meeting running over time, yours. The tension between two colleagues nobody wants to name, also yours. The spec that's technically done, but doesn't answer the actual business question, still yours. This isn't about sacrifice. It's not about doing everybody else's job. It is about understanding that leaders who rise the fastest are the ones who treat their scope as a starting point and not a finish line. Once my manager at the bank told me to ask a better question, I started changing things around. I attended more meetings which were out of my scope. I started looking at the infrastructure and tasks up and down the stream. This helped me understand what was affecting my impact and what impact I generated for others. The habit to build here is simple, but uncomfortable. Before you close any task, ask yourself, did this actually move the outcome forward, or did I just complete the activity? Those are two very different things, and learning to tell them apart is the very first shift. Point number two, excuses and explanations feel identical from the inside. Here's where it gets harder. I was managing a product release. A key data analyst on my team went sick for weeks. The deadline started slipping, and I kept saying the same thing to my team, to leadership, to myself. It is not my fault. And here's the thing. I wasn't wrong. It generally wasn't my fault, but it was confusing fault with ownership. And that confusion cost us weeks. The excuses most leaders reach out for aren't lies. They're usually accurate. The information was incomplete. The decision hadn't come from above. The resource wasn't there. The problem is that an excuse, even a true one, explains what happened, but it doesn't change anything. Accountable leaders ask a different question. Not why didn't it work, but what could I have done differently? And when you ask that honestly, and I mean honestly, there's always an answer. You could have flagged the risk earlier. You could have escalated instead of waited. You could have restructured the timeline the moment the first signal appeared. The difference between an explanation and accountability mindset isn't the words, it is what you do next. An explanation closes the loop on the past. An accountability mindset opens the door for what is next. Point number three, we is where accountability goes to die. I want to talk about the most dangerous word in leadership, Not the obvious ones, not the blame or failure or mistake. The most accountability killing word I've seen in boardrooms, leadership offsites, and team retrospectives is this: we. We are working on it. We dropped the ball. We will follow up. It sounds collaborative. It sounds safe. It even sounds humble. But when everyone owns it, no one owns it. I watched a leader run an entire organization like one big family. Good intentions everywhere, warmth in every meeting. And underneath it all, nothing was clear. Two colleagues got into a public conflict and it was left unaddressed for weeks because nobody wanted to be the one to name it. It was everyone's problem, which meant there was no one's problem. The fix isn't complicated, but it does require courage. One owner per outcome. Always. Not a team, not a committee, one name. Every open item in every meeting ends with a name and a date. Not we will follow up, Vladimir will follow up by Thursday. Not we dropped the ball, I dropped the ball. This isn't about the blame. It's about creating the kind of clarity that actually allows trust to form. Because people don't trust vague commitments, they trust specific ones, and the people who keep them. Point number 4. Accountability without metrics is just intention. Here's a mistake I see constantly, even in the high-performing teams. Everyone is aligned. The energy is good. People are bought in. And 3 months later, nobody agrees on whether it worked. It's not a morale problem. It's not a strategy problem. It's an accountability problem. And it started before a single task was assigned. Because you cannot own an outcome you have never defined. The most accountable leaders I've worked with share one discipline. They define what winning looks like before the work starts. A clear, specific, measurable goal. Not a vibe, not a direction, a result. Then they track the signals and tell them if they're heading there, not just whether the work is getting done, but whether it's working. Leading indicators, not just lagging ones. They make the progress visible weekly, not quarterly, because quarterly is too slow to course correct and too late to own anything meaningfully. And when the numbers look bad, they get curious before they get defensive. Accountability isn't about bracing for blame, it's about owning what you learn and deciding what comes next. Metrics without accountability are just numbers. Accountability without metrics is just intention. You need both, and the time to define them is always before you start. Point number 5. How do you handle failure is the real signal. The best leaders I've worked with have one thing in common. They've all failed. Some of them very publicly, and they talk about it, not to perform vulnerability, but because they've learned that how you handle a miss tells people everything about whether your accountability is real or just rehearsed. I watched an executive sit through a high-stakes demo failure at a robotics company. Public, painful, everything the team had built tolvered. He could have pointed down, explained the dependencies, named every factor outside of his control. Instead of he owned it, got to work. Not because it felt good, because he understood that the moment after failure is when your credibility is actually built or lost. Here's what accountability and failure looks in practice. You separate the outcome from the person. A failed project is not a failed leader. When you collapse those two things, you lose good people and build cultures where nobody takes the risks worth taking. You run honest postmortems, not blame sessions dressed up in a meeting format. You ask, what did we miss as a system? Before you ask, who dropped the ball? One builds, the other one just assigns. You close the loop with the people counting on you. They deserve to know what happened, what you learned, and what changes. That conversation is uncomfortable, and it also where trust is either built or permanently lost. Failure isn't the opposite of accountability. Hiding from it is. So here's what we've covered, and more importantly, what I want you to actually take into this week. Accountability isn't about how hard you work, it is about whether the outcome moved. Ownership doesn't stop at your job description, it starts there. Excuses can be true and still be the way. We diffuses the one thing that makes accountability real, a name. Metrics aren't bureaucracy, they are the only way accountability has something to attach to. And failure, handled honestly, is where real leadership credibility is forged. The question I want to leave you with is the one that changed how I lead. It's the same one my manager asked me years ago. Did it actually work? Not did you try, not did you complete it, not did you show up. Did it work? Start asking that question about everything in your world. And watch how quickly your team, your results, and the way that people talk about you start to shift. I've created an assessment to analyze this kind of gaps. Why don't you check the link in the description, and I'll see you for the next video.